Well, with that, let's bring in three people who know a thing or two about running election campaigns. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy, a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Cheryl Oates is a principal at GT and most recently campaign director for the Saskatchewan NDP. And Jordan Paquet, vice president at Blue Sky Strategy Group, deputy campaign manager, or was deputy campaign manager for the PEI-PC party in the last provincial election. Hello to the three of you.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. So listen, I got to start with the question, how bad is this kind of story for Mr. Poilievre and really for any political leader? Because, on the one hand, the Globe and Mail is very clear, and in that they say that there's no evidence to suggest that Mr. Poilievre nor his inner circle knew that this alleged foreign interference was happening. But on the other hand, it was to his benefit, allegedly, not to his hindrance. How bad is the story, Michele?
Well, most importantly, it's the last day on the campaign. Mr. Poilievre is answering for something that he doesn't want to. Instead of putting forward whatever it was that he had planned to say today, he is instead having to answer to this allegation. And I think that, the substance of the issue, while really serious, and it is quite unfathomable why he doesn't have a security clearance and why he hasn't just gone and gotten one. But that really speaks to responsibility and leadership. And that is what the test is right now. That is what the election is all about. Who is the person who's going to stand up for Canada? And who is the person who will take responsibility as it's needed to get the knowledge that they need to have so that they can make the right decision? And in this case, Poilievre, for some curious reason, has chosen to stay in the dark. And all he can say is that I'm doing it so that I can still be partisan, essentially, and still kind of say things that I know are probably not true, but I won't be hampered by any kind of public security clearance. So again, it's a huge distraction, and it's not what they need.
Cheryl, what would you say to the question?
Yeah, I think that for regular people watching this, it does seem a bit weird. Like, of course, Pierre Poilievre didn't know about this interference. He doesn't have the clearance to have learned about it even after the fact. And in normal times, just as Mark Carney said, and I find this very compelling, in normal times, it would be weird for the leader of the opposition to not get security clearance, to not want to know what the threats against Canada's economy and our country are. But at these times, when we are facing such incredible threat, when we are facing threat from our neighbors, when we are, talking about economic force and annexation, during an election period, it seems unfathomable to say that you are a serious contender to want to lead a party and not want to be privy to that really, really important information. So I think for people across the country, this is damaging for Pierre Poilievre. I think it looks like he has something to hide, and I think he just does not look like a serious contender for this job.
Jordan?
Yeah, I don't think so. There's nothing new here. This story has already been told back before in December that there was potentially something happening in this leadership campaign, as there were for other ones. What this clearly was on a campaign side was an attempt by the Liberals to change the channel. They saw the last 2 days Pierre Poilievre was out with strong affordability messages. They didn't like that. They didn't like where this was going. They wanted to keep this campaign solely on the issue with Donald Trump. The Conservatives were trying to pull it back towards the affordability message, and then so they tried to do this. So let me get this straight. They won't brief the leader of the opposition on certain things, but they'll go and brief the Globe and Mail on it. I think this is an inside the Queensway story that will quickly go away quite quickly. It hasn't added up. It's only seems to be Liberals that are talking about the security clearance issue. He's had clearance before. He's obviously going to have it again. It's a non-issue to me in the rest of the campaign. This was just a distraction.
Well, you use the word distraction, and it's interesting because what happened in response to it, Pierre Poilievre, he did say what we just heard, but he added on to that because he tried to take the focus off of himself and essentially put the focus onto Mark Carney, raising a potential story. Take a listen to, in addition to what we heard from Pierre Poilievre today.
So, for example, if they'd given me some kind of cursory briefing on China, then they would say, oh, you can't go talk about the fact that Mark Carney went off to Beijing and had meetings where he had secret talks with top government banking officials, after which a government bank gave his company a $250,000 loan, a loan that his company still owes, and a company in which he's still invested, meaning that he is the most compromised and conflicted leader our country has ever seen.
Okay, so in that answer, two things essentially. One, explaining why he's not taking the security clearance that he's being criticized for not taking, and two, trying to raise another story involving Mark Carney and a meeting that took place apparently in the People's Republic of China. And to that, this is what the Liberal Party said in a statement. They say, quote, "This is a desperate attempt by Pierre Poilievre to distract from the fact that he refuses to get his security clearance at a time of crisis for Canada, whether it's not getting his security clearance or his friend Danielle Smith confirming he'd follow Donald Trump's playbook. Pierre Poilievre is the wrong choice at the wrong time." So, that's a bit of... Doesn't sound like they
answered your question.
Sorry?
Doesn't sound like they answered your question.
Well, Michele, what do you make of that? Because, again, they were asking about this, about security clearances, and he did try to shift it onto Mark Carney instead.
Well, I think he's desperate to get onto his own footing for sure, and he's still trying to find something that might stick. He's in the unfortunate circumstance where he's never had a private sector job, so he doesn't really understand the private sector, and is trying to throw some darts at someone who was actually quite successful in the private sector and who has nothing to hide, put everything into a blind trust. And, whatever kind of connotation that he was trying to suggest that was going to somehow mute him because he didn't get some kind of a security clearance, it's clearly just nonsense. They've had a couple bad days. He failed to stand up to Danielle Smith. In the eyes of Canadians, I would suspect that they're thinking, can't stand up to her. I highly doubt that you're going to be able to stand up to Donald Trump. And I think that that's what they're really faced with. They're in they're completely being squeezed, and they don't know how to get their footing. And so throwing mud at the wall and throwing mud back is kind of what the opposition research folks on all sides and in all parties live for, is to see their stories hit the media of the day. But I don't think that Canadians will be distracted, quite frankly, from many of these stories.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I think the Liberals just teed this one up, and the Conservatives just hit the ball for them. If the Conservatives did not want to be talking about these issues today, they should have stopped talking about these issues today, because Pierre Poilievre offered a very detailed, somewhat convoluted, tough story for Canadians to follow about why Mark Carney is just as dangerous as what he's saying Pierre Poilievre is. Like I said, tough for Canadians to follow. And then hit it right back to the Liberals for them to just offer a very succinct response saying Pierre Poilievre won't get his security clearance at a time when our country is facing economic threat. It's a much tighter message for the Liberals. It's a much more believable message from the Liberals. And the other problem is that Pierre Poilievre's messaging does appeal to a certain group, but it appeals to the people that he already has. It appeals to his base. And if the Conservatives want to be successful in this election, they need to start talking to those disenfranchised Liberals, the ones that they had previously held. They need to talk to the New Democrats. They need to talk to the politically homeless. And that kind of really conservative messaging just doesn't appeal to those folks.
Jordan?
But yeah, look, this is an issue that has knocked the Liberals off before, and if they want to start to go down this rabbit hole, I'm sure the Conservatives are very willing to. As I've said before, Mark Carney's financial assets and lack of disclosure is going to be his Achilles heel at some point during this election. There's only a matter of time before journalists do start asking questions about it. And also, even on the foreign interference thing, we haven't heard them describe Chandra Arya. How is he able to sit in the Liberal caucus for 10 years and now suddenly he's not good enough to run for leader? He's not good enough to sit in as MP. So we haven't heard the end of that particular story, but it will raise additional questions about Mark Carney's disclosures of assets. He hasn't been out there. Canadians don't know enough about him yet on those things. And I think Conservatives are right to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I do wonder, because this story comes out day 3 of the campaign. It essentially takes the oxygen out of the room in terms of any kind of policy announcement that was being made. Is this the type of election that we're in for? It's going to be a short one, but is it going to be this one with a lot of lobs and volleys being thrown by all sides, Michele?
Without question, it's going to be nasty, and that's kind of just the pace of regular campaigns. But it doesn't detract from, and I think Cheryl was alluding to this, with the main issue that Canadians are looking for. They're looking to see who is going to stand up to Donald Trump and who can best shape the Canadian economy so that we are resilient and that we don't depend on them so much. And so every day that Pierre Poilievre is trying to talk about some assets that Mark Carney has, when the only asset that he has is his, taxpayer-fed pension plan that's ready to go since he was 31, then they're losing. They need to regain ground. They need to show and demonstrate that Pierre Poilievre actually has what it takes to be prime minister, that he can rise to the occasion, that he actually has a vision for the country. And the more he's mired in guck and kind of throwing it himself, the more problematic it's going to be for them.
Okay, I'm going to go to Jordan because I hear a lot of rustling to the to the right of me here. So,
look, the message is coming back to affordability. No matter what is happening with Trump, Canadians still can't afford to buy a new home. They're still having trouble affording groceries. These are issues over the last 10 years that has been on the Liberals, and Mark Carney has been their economic advisor, which is what the Conservatives are going to point out. So none of that's going to go away. It's not going to be about who can manage Trump. It's about who can make the economy more resilient. That's what Conservatives were talking about. For the first 2 days, Liberals were getting angry that was starting to collect a bit of steam, and then tried to throw out an old story into it today just to kind of muddy the waters. But yeah, I think we'll be on to new things tomorrow.
Okay, Cheryl, last word to you.
Yeah, I see it a bit differently. I think, yes, of course, affordability is top of mind for Canadians, and it has been for a long time. But in this election right now, the two main contenders, their offer to Canadians is pretty similar. And yes, there are some details that make these proposals a little bit different. But for the average Canadian, both parties are saying no more carbon tax. Both parties are saying you get a tax cut. Both parties are saying no GST on $1 million homes. So that essentially neutralizes the conversation around affordability. You want things to be cheaper? Both parties are offering something cheaper. And that is a tactical move from the Liberals to say, let's take affordability off the table in terms of which party is going to save you more money, and make this election about who is best placed to take on Donald Trump and take on the United States at a time when our country is under threat. So I think they're doing that quite skillfully. And at this point in time, when you look across the polling, most Canadians are feeling like Mark Carney is a much better person suited for that job.
Okay, well, this is just day 3. We will continue to have the conversation. Michelle, Cheryl, Jordan, poor Jordan, who's taking notes, Cheryl. He wanted to respond so badly. Jordan, thank you very much for the time. We'll talk again next week. Yes, there'll be more weeks. Take care, guys. Thank you.